A specialist in transforming health and wellness, Dav Panesar is a mind-body medicine advocate, a prominent figure in transpersonal and transformative health and wellness medicine, as well as a public speaker. He's one of the pioneers of mindfulness and contemplative-based health interventions in the UK, with over 25 years of experience in developing, teaching, and working with right mindfulness and mindfulness-based approaches and models within the health, public and private sectors. This has earned him international respect and recognition, making Dav and his approaches highly sought after. He's a scientist with degrees in chemistry and microbiology, business, transpersonal psychology and consciousness studies. His expertise in Eastern psychology, together with science and mindfulness, and combined with experiential training and guidance from both his academic peers and his highly esteemed teachers, has made Dav and his work highly contemporary, incredibly effective, and enlightening. Dav is a co-founder and a mindfulness and transpersonal health advisor to Diabetes Digital Health Limited. Diabetes.co.uk have enabled over 250,000 people to reduce, reverse, or place diabetes type 2 into remission through a revolutionary online 10-week low-carb program. The results from this program was so spectacular that the approach and the results that were produced were featured on the front page of The New Scientist in June 2016, in addition to making the front pages of The Times, The Daily Mail and other mainstream news outlets. Proving the possibility of reversing type 2 diabetes is a watershed project that has worldwide implications. Dav has developed a highly effective and practical approach to cultivating genuine health and well-being and actualising your own potential. His model brings together the four constituents of human health: physical, mental, emotional, and transpersonal. The results speak for themselves, with thousands regaining control over their health and well-being, transforming health, and empowering individuals to cultivate positive emotions such as hope, joy, compassion, and self-acceptance through the portal of right mindfulness-based practice, and enabling many to discover their purpose, their meaning, and their joy for life. Dav's model is designed to optimise our personal and transpersonal health and well-being. Please welcome Dav Panesar.
So, mindfulness and spiritual intelligence. This year it's particularly poignant for me, and for two reasons. The first reason is it's 5 years on, and we have moved the dialogue and the discourse of mindfulness away from, or should I say further from, just depression, anxiety and stress. And we're starting to look at the real applications and implications of meditation with the right guidance. And the second reason is that Professor Les was my professor. Do you know how nervous it feels to have the man who taught you sitting in front of you? So as tradition dictates, do I have your permission to carry on? Yes. Thank you. Without teachers, we can't do nothing. And I think we don't respect our teachers enough in this day and age. So for me, it's a privilege to share the stage with Les, and humbled as well, and scared as well. So, spiritual intelligence and mindfulness. In order to explore this, let me go back to the Flame Center and their mission statement. The mission statement of the Flame Center is very simple: a whole new approach to health and well-being. Now, it's a simple statement, but it contains a lot of wisdom in that. What do we mean by health? Is health just absence of disease? Or is health the absence of stress? Is health peace? Is health compassion? So these ideas we decided that we would try and add within our model. And the model that we came about, which Matt alluded to, contains 4 parts: mind, body, emotions, and the transpersonal element. And I'll try and explain a little bit about that. The body. At the center, we deal with the body in a number of ways. 1, Ayurvedic-based principles, using food as medicine, allowing the body to regenerate itself. Remember, the body is a self-healing system. If you cut yourself, it heals itself. The others may tell you that you need medical intervention for healing, but the body heals itself as long as you don't mess with it. And the same is true for the mind. So with the body, we deal with these interventions to do with food, increase chi through Tai Chi, Qi Kong, increase prana through yoga, and then putting all of these together, it helps improve agility, mobility, ease pain, etc. On the mind, we enable people to recognize states of mental states which are detrimental to their health. When you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling irritated, when you're feeling that your perceptions are distorted. So we allow people to understand, recognize them, and then transform them, cultivating a sense of peace. And then moving on to the emotional side. On the emotional side, I think one of the biggest problems is that we don't realize when we are in an emotional state that's detrimental to our health. So when we are fearful, when we are angry, when we are confused, when we are in a conflict, when we have concerns to do with mortality and so forth, illness, old age, all of these things impact our mind, which impacts our emotions. And those emotions come out as sensations within the body. So when you go to the doctor doesn't treat the cause of the problem. And I'm quite happy to say this in public. They treat the symptoms, because the symptoms come out. But the root of health begins with the mind. Going to the gym isn't necessarily making you healthy. But meditation, mindfulness, is certainly the right step towards it. And this model has consistently delivered results. On the transpersonal side, what are we looking at? We are looking at things like self-discovery. Who are you? Once you get the mind, body, and emotions in sync, in alignment, new questions arise. There you are doing your 10 minutes in the morning or half an hour, and all of a sudden you realize, what am I doing here? And I'm not thinking, what am I doing here doing this meditation practice? What am I doing here? What is it all about? Is my life simply about collecting bits of plastic, sacrificing my life, sacrificing my relationships, sacrificing my health, just for a few numbers on a statement? Is that what it's all about? All the hassle? Remember one thing. Life is finite. The illusion is that we have time. And we have to ask ourselves the question, in this incredible plethora of existence, don't you think it's unique that you have this consciousness, this awareness that you are here? So mindfulness allows us to touch that part of us, allows us to go to a space where we recognize that there's something deeper within ourselves. None of this would be possible if it was not for the family of volunteers that we have. And I use that word very cautiously and deliberately. All the people, all this has been organized, not through paid staff. Every single individual that's here today is doing because they wish to do it. Community. Humanity. Why? Because they found something of significance from what the center was offering. So in order to understand mindfulness within the context of this health process, context of moving from depression, anxiety and stress, because suffering will always bring you to meditation. You never go to the doctor when you're feeling well. The same is true with meditation. You only approach meditation when everything else seems to have failed. And the truth of the matter is, of all the people that are referred to us, there's a substantial number who have tried conventional medicine. For example, we had our role model, young Evan, last year, 10-year-old, telling us the impact that had on him when everything else had failed. And we notice that it is suffering that brings us to this point. It is the need to find another method, another way of doing it. We've touched on a subject called mind-body relationship, how the mind and the body are connected. Next time you go to your GP, ask them, could you tell me, Mr. or Mrs. GP, how does my mind impact my body? And we would love to hear your feedback. Because the truth of the matter is, biomedical model, the model that you have out there, does not accept that the mind and the body are connected. So you have two schools, or should I have two business venues or revenue streams? You have the psychological revenue stream, which is stress, leads to inflammation. Inflammation leads to disease. It's simple. It's very, very simple. The mathematics is all there. It's just a question of taking some of these scientists out of the way and looking at the subjective experience of ourselves. So here we are today, sharing with you another dimension of mindfulness, spiritual intelligence. And in order to understand spiritual intelligence, I would like to first address something called worldview. The way you have been trained and I have been trained to look at the world. You weren't born with this, neither was I. Our culture, our religions, our society, our schooling, our society, all the communities around us have an impact, and this gives us a worldview, the way we look at the world and the way we see ourselves in that world. And that has two impacts. Your worldview, my worldview, will determine two things. One, what you get out of life, and two, how you engage in life. So for example, if I am angry, irritated, I find the world hostile. So I isolate myself. If I am fearful, I find the world dangerous. I isolate myself. If I practice some mindfulness, cultivate a bit of stillness, a bit of compassion, before you know it, my engagement changes, my relationships changes, and the meaning of my life changes. What I feel inside directly impacts how I engage with the world. And if I have been trained to look at myself as a sinner, or look at myself as less than something else, look at myself as deficient, then I'm going to act it out. And this is where mindfulness becomes pretty important, because it enables us to go beyond the layers of our conditioning, beyond the layers of what we think, how we think, what we think, and how we speak to ourselves. This worldview that considers life to be meaningless, the universe to be a meaningless machine that has no value, life to be a process of chemistry and physics that keeps you alive. It's a pretty depressing worldview. And what has it done? It has poisoned everything it's touched. It's poisoned the seas, it's poisoned the rivers, it's poisoned the forests, flora, it's poisoned people's minds. Look at the state of the world we're in. And these people are leading us? Ask yourself that question. Giving the most precious thing that you have to someone else, and that's your life, is a big statement of trust. And we trust that they are telling us the truth. And the worldview that we have been indoctrinated with through religions, through society, through schooling, is the right worldview. And the truth of the matter is that this worldview isolates us. Put with this the constant 24/7 media that induces fear and stress-related stories that keep us distracted. With all this going on, who's got the time to look within themselves? So mindfulness becomes difficult when we have all this internal turmoil and distortion going on. And this is where the center like the flame is so critical, because it's like-minded people. We're all on the same journey. We've all been through the same problems. And when we sit together and we practice, we find motivation, we find support, we find guidance, and we're able to develop this. So to live as healthy, purposeful beings is not that difficult. It's simply about enabling ourselves to move beyond this conditioning. Just as mindfulness is revolutionizing the way we approach health and well-being, spiritual intelligence has the capacity to enable everyone the opportunity to unveil their true human potential. Spiritual intelligence is when we allow this conditioning to drop down and a new manner of seeing reveals itself. Why does it reveal itself? Because as our conditioning is dropping, we use our experience to direct our truth. We allow our experience to tell us, I am actually quite a content human being. I am quite a peaceful human being. So our own experience becomes our authority. And this is where emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence begin to take real meaning. So mindfulness practice with the right guidance will lead you to emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence means what? You become a little bit compassionate. You realize the conversation you're having with yourself, you wouldn't have that with your worst enemy. Self-compassion begins to take birth. Out of self-compassion, we become compassionate to others. So if compassion is the flower of meditation, spiritual intelligence is the fragrance that surrounds that flower. What does that mean? It means it's not a technique that's told. It's not a technique that can be taught. It's an essence. It's a state of being. It's something that you sense. Mindfulness creates the garden, and out of this garden, the flowers that bloom are compassion, acceptance. Because only when you're compassionate to yourself will you accept yourself. And self-acceptance is one of the biggest barriers we have. So once these two come together, as Les said, wisdom begins to take birth. We pride so much information and knowledge. We are born in a culture that prides itself on intellect, yet lacks the intellect to know itself. In fact, our society seems to be in darkness about itself while it's chasing everything else. So mindfulness allows us not to renounce this, not to get detached from this, but to discover ourselves within this matrix itself. Spiritual intelligence is the hallmark of authenticity. So mindfulness leads us to compassion. Compassion leads us to spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is our authenticity, our very nature, who we are, what we are. And how do we define spiritual intelligence? I'll give you three parts to it. Three parts to authenticity or spiritual intelligence. The first one is self-awareness. How aware are you of yourself? And it's not how aware of you in terms of I know who I am. The important thing is to know who you are not who you are, but what you are not, in order to reveal what you are. Mindfulness, self-awareness leads to emotional intelligence, knowing how you feel inside, how to act with that feeling, and when to act with that feeling. And the third component of authenticity stroke spiritual intelligence is self-trust, being able to speak your truth. When we first did the event here, 2013, and we spoke about mind-body relationship, it was totally contrary to the medical view. But it's your experience and my experience. In the middle of the night, something falls outside. That noise triggers off this huge reaction within us. Of course, the mind and the body are connected. So mind-body medicine is now becoming mainstream as more and more research is enabling us to identify that our thoughts, our emotions actually impact our state of being and our health, which then impacts everything else around us. So what does authenticity, how is it expressed? Well, the first is you speak your truth, as I said. The second is you lead from the heart. What does that mean? People are about life. Life is about people. Relationships are about people, health is about people, business is about people. Leading from the heart means keeping that in front. That's your priority. That's the agenda. It's enabling yourself to live well and enabling others to live well. That's the agenda of authenticity. That's the hallmark of that authenticity. And we create teams and we create communities when we foster human relationship that actually prioritizes humanity over profit. The Flame Center works on a shoestring and even less. Actually, there's no paid staff there. And one day we were asked, how much profit do you make? And I'll tell you one thing, we make no profit. Our profit is zero in terms of money. But our profit in terms of health and well-being is way in the 1,000%. So we deal in health, we don't deal in money. And this is a hallmark of communities and volunteers working together to ensure that they do well for themselves and well for others. Authenticity also means having courage to speak and having courage to walk the route that is less traveled. Not because it is hard or easy, because it's the right thing to do. Exactly the way the center has created itself. It means to deepen ourselves. Let's ask this question, how deep can you go? In fact, how deep can you go? Perhaps if you go home and try a bit of mindfulness, sit there and ask yourself the question, who's sitting here doing this? And you may be surprised at the answer. It's about looking after ourselves at a physical level, a mental level, an emotional level, and a transpersonal level. Beyond the psyche, beyond the self, beyond the ego self, moving forward, recognizing that we have a body, we have a mind, we have emotions, but this isn't all of us. There is something more to this. And this is where consciousness plays a key role. Authenticity leaves legacies. Success is great, but significance is greater. And every single individual that has stood here today has shared their story, and over the past 4 years, the reason they've done that is because it's had a significant experience as a result of encountering the center itself. Authenticity is the gold standard for leadership, it's the gold standard for change, and it's a gold standard for changing and enabling others. So in order to illustrate my point, I would like to leave you with a short story, if I can find it. So here I am. So we all share this moment. This moment, as Francesca said, is such a unique moment. Never again will it be repeated. Ever. And that's something quite sobering, but something quite sweet too. Our mind, if we feel irritated, can make this moment quite difficult to bear. But if we sit in acceptance, then this moment becomes quite peaceful, quite rewarding, quite engaging. So we all share this moment. We can choose, we can decide either to remain in this collective consensual worldview that we called reality, and in my word it's called semi-hypnosis, or we can take a chance and we can begin to decide that we can look a little bit deeper within ourselves. We can discover our power, we can choose, we can act, and we can change. Remember, the illusion is that you have time. This very breath that you're taking right now, so take a deep breath. Was the last breath you took. So every time you go back to your breath, notice it's the last breath you're taking. Put some effort into it. Put some awareness into it. Who knows if the second one will be there. The illusion is that we have time. Wake up before you breathe your last breath and realize that your life has been nothing more than a figment of your imagination. If we allow others to define ourselves, then we lose the right to be who and what you are. Let me repeat that again. If you allow others to define who you are, then you lose the right to be who and what you are. The time for mindfulness activity to enable us to recognize who and what we are seems to be becoming ever more present. And events like this are starting to set that agenda. So to illustrate my point, I will leave you with a short story. Promise you it's short. So, in 1957, in Thailand, there was a monastery. And in this monastery, there was a huge stone/clay statue. And it had been in this monastery for generations, perhaps 1,000, 1,500 years. And they really looked after it, cleaned it, looked after it. As they were moving in the monastery from one place to another, the statue fell down and it developed a crack. One night, there's a thunderstorm and lightning flashes. And as a young man is walking past this huge statue, he sees something glimmer back from this crack. So he takes a torch, shines it in this crack, and sure enough, there's something there glimmering back, shining back. So the following day, he goes to his superiors and he says, look, there's something in that statue. And the head guys there say, look, we can't do anything to the statue. It's an heirloom. We've had it for 1,500 years. What do you mean? There's something in it. Crack it. Let's, patch it up. But this young man insisted. So they decided, okay, we'll have enough courage. Let's just chip away a little bit. And they began to chip away. And soon the stones fell down and revealed a layer of clay. And as they chipped a little bit further, they were astounded to find a solid gold statue hidden in this clay. This story illustrates our condition. We all conceal this priceless treasure within us. We all hide this gold under the clay of our conditioning. Mindfulness practice is not just about addressing depression, stress, anxiety, or pain, but through the cultivation of contentment and compassion. Because mindfulness has a journey. You begin with contentment. It's out of contentment that compassion arises. If you aren't content, compassion is bogus. It's feeding our ego. Only through contentment does compassion arise. So mindfulness leads you to cultivation of contentment. Cultivation of contentment enables compassion to be experienced. This compassion, with the right guidance and practice, will open the doorway to discovering something so profound that it has lasting meaning, it has purpose, and it's a recognition of a truth beyond belief, but that truth is just beneath your nose. It's underneath you. All we're doing is we're looking in the wrong direction. This word conversion is a really interesting word, because it's not about changing one way of thinking to another. It's just looking, instead of looking out, begin to look in. And the only way in is through your breath, because breath is your teacher. So the tools are before you. You have the map to this treasure. You've had the excellent subject that Les has opened up about consciousness and moving beyond ourselves, getting deeper. So you have a map. You have the treasure. You know where the treasure is. All you need is a bit of courage. Just like those guys were protecting this clay statue for hundreds of years, we've been protecting our identity, our sense of self, since we've been born. So maybe let's just say, let's have a look. Let's go a bit deeper. Have some courage. Use these tools of mindfulness. Use the facilities of the center and chip away at the clay of your conditioning to reveal what you really are. And you may be pleasantly surprised to discover that something that's infinite, something that's boundless, something that's uncreated, something that's undying, something that is an ocean of consciousness with infinite possibilities. And each one of those possibilities are in your hand. And all you need to do is take that first step. So I wish you the best in your success. Thank you very much.